Hey everyone, I hope you're having a great day. I'm Belle Reid, and thanks for tuning into this video. So today is the second video in a new series in which I pour myself a cup of tea and answer questions that are sent to me from the wonderful folks in my Patreon community. If you want to submit a question for the next Q&A video, all you have to do is become a patron at any tier on my Patreon page and then look for the post that says submit your questions here. All right, so without further ado, let's get started. So the first question is from Jevin, who asks, whether writing music, improvising, or performing, to what degree do you allow randomness? And does it differ between those various modes of creating? Cool. That's a really interesting question. I would definitely say that some kind of randomness or unpredictability or chaos plays a role in most of the music that I make. When I am improvising in particular, I would say that it's more of an act of kind of embracing randomness or chaos or unpredictability rather than, intentionally using it in a particular way. And it's more of a mindset thing. So I always come back to this quote that I read in Pauline Oliveros' book, her Deep Listening composer's sound practice book, which I can leave a link to below if you want to check it out. I really strongly recommend it for so many reasons. But there's this one sentence in the book where Pauline is talking about just the act and the practice of listening and being deeply aware and intentional listening, or what she refers to as deep listening in her practice. And here, I'll read you the quote. It'll be better than me trying to remember how it goes. Deep listening is a form of meditation. Attention is directed to the interplay of sounds and silences, or to the sound-silence continuum. Sound is not limited to musical or speaking sounds, but is inclusive of all perceptible vibrations or sonic formations. The relationship of all perceptible sounds is important. The practice is intended to expand consciousness to the whole space-time continuum of sound and silence. And the text goes on from there, but I remember a number of years ago when I first read that, I was so captivated by the idea of simply approaching musical improvisations as moments to kind of expand your listening and expand your awareness of all possible sounds in the universe, not just the ones that you create on your instruments, not just the ones that are musical, not just the ones that are created by other people playing musical instruments, but literally any possible sound. The floorboards creaking or someone's cell phone going off or anything, an ambulance in the background and things like that. And kind of being open to embrace those sounds and that form of sonic chaos or unpredictability as part of the musical tapestry and as part of the shared experience of performing and improvising. So that is definitely one way that I think that I allow or embrace randomness when I'm improvising. You might be, in your question, you might be referring more to randomness in terms of like a random number generator or a random voltages and things like that. And that's also something that I love to explore as well. But again, on the more technical side of things, what I like to do, instead of just using a random source to modulate one parameter, let's say, to create a random melody, so to modulate the pitch of an oscillator, for example. Instead of doing something like that, where the relationship is pretty clear and there's a one-to-one connection between the random source and the thing it is affecting, instead, what I am more interested in doing is kind of embedding the unpredictability deeper into some kind of instrument structure or some kind of compositional framework. A great example of what I'm talking about is no input mixing. When you create all of these kind of tangled feedback loops and these non-linear loops within an instrument, you very quickly lose the direct one-to-one control of each slider and each knob, right? So in no input mixing, when you increase the gain or the volume on one channel, it doesn't just increase the loudness of that channel, it will make things sputter in a different way. It can change the pitch. It can have an effect as though it's filtering the sound and different things like that. The instruments themselves kind of have their own character and kind of take on a life of their own. I'm not always the only person in the driver's seat. Sometimes I will nudge the instrument one direction and then it will nudge back and it will kind of steer the conversation just as much, if not more, sometimes as I am steering the conversation. So the second question comes from Tom Smith, who asks, do you have any tips for practicing solo free improvisation or for winning over people who might not be familiar with it? So of course, this is a never-ending learning experience and growth process in terms of improvisation. And that's part of the reason why it's so wonderful and so compelling, is because, it really will just continue to be an exploration for as long as you are willing to explore it. If you're brand new to free improvisation and you're kind of feeling a little bit stuck, like you don't know where to begin, it can be really helpful to give yourself some kind of prompt or like a guide almost, or something to kind of jump from, a springboard. I find that what can be particularly helpful are adjectives, because they're usually things that we relate to both emotionally and also physically often, which can be really, really good. And colors can also be pretty interesting to explore. So I'll give you an example of how you might do this exercise. You could use a random word generator, or you could just dream up some adjectives that you find particularly evocative. It really could be any word that you're feeling compelled to explore. And then without thinking about it too much, just try to pick up your instrument or, go to your instrument and let whatever the first sound is or the first gesture is that comes to mind in relation to that sound, to that word, come out and explore it for a few seconds or a few minutes without any judgment of what's happening. It doesn't need to, be polished. It doesn't need to sound like a performance. The idea here is that you're just exercising and practicing the act of spontaneously making music without a lot of pre-planning. And I find that adding adjectives or other words into the mix can help you sometimes get out of your music making technical brain, like what note should I play, what key should I play in, and all of that, and just kind of let your imagination take over. So these little kind of games that you can create for yourself can be a really great way to essentially make etudes that will, over time, give you more comfort and more familiarity with the idea of improvising. And then as time goes on, you won't necessarily need to reach for a prompt. You'll just be able to jump in and open your ears and open your imagination and kind of let things flow. Okay, 2 down. Time for a sip of tea. The next question comes from Jacob, who asks, can you talk about gradient in any kind of depth? It sounds like a fascinating instrument. Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for your interest in gradient. I I can talk about it, and I'm very excited to, so I will. So first off, gradient is actually not an instrument, but it's a project between Ryan Gaston and myself that started a number of years ago, and it's dedicated to the development of new experimental sound devices, musical instruments, and controllers of all shapes and sizes. And what I believe you are asking about in particular is an instrument that we have been working on for well over a year now called Continual Transition. I shared this a few months ago on my Instagram feed, so I think that might be the instrument in particular that you're talking about. So Continual Transition is an electronic noise device that is in many ways actually built upon the ideas of listening and chaos and feedback that I've been talking about so far in this video. It employs a chaotic synthesis system that has multiple feedback and feed-forward nodes, each which play a unique role in defining both timbral, structural, and temporal aspects of the sound that emerges from this device. So unlike a typical synthesizer where you would have, a control for, let's say, pitch and another one for filter or something like that, the surface level controls on Continual Transition are going to have more of an impact on the overall structure of the instrument than they will have on specific musical parameters. So when you're interacting with this, we encourage you to be less concerned with what melody you're playing or what harmonies you're creating and so on, and instead to be more focused on really engaging in a kind of curious state of listening, and to think about what kind of interactions and structures you're creating or influencing or nudging into motion with your physical gestures. So Continual Transition has gone through a number of different prototyping stages over the last year and a half or so, and we are now in a final beta testing stage, which is really exciting, and we can't wait to share this with all of you. I actually have one of the more recent production units here with me. It doesn't have its case, obviously, at the moment, but yes, it has come an awful long way, and we are so excited to share this with you all soon. So what I encourage you to do, if you're curious about learning more about this and any of our other instruments as well, is to follow the link that is in the description of this video to sign up on our email list, which will basically keep you up to date not only on Continual Transition, but on the other instruments that we are building as well. We have made it to the final question. This one comes in from Thomas, who says, what is your go-to instrument or other device/object/sound for making music? Oh, okay, that's definitely a tricky question. But you know what? I think that without a doubt, I would say my trumpet. Which particular trumpet? I'm not entirely sure about, because I do have a few and they all have so many wonderful, unique qualities. But I would say that my go-to instrument would be the trumpet, because it is one of my first instruments. I've been playing it now for decades, and I think when I hear sound, I think about it through the perspective of the trumpet. Now, in particular, I would probably add on to that I would choose my trumpet with MIGSI, which is my electronic sensor interface on my trumpet, with my laptop computer, which is the software side of MIGSI. So that might be totally cheating because that's kind of like multiple instruments in one. But, you know, over the last 5 or 6 years, as we've been developing MIGSI, it has become such a core part of who I am as a performer and music maker. As someone who also plays electronic instruments, of course, I am so curious and inspired about, you know, all of the different synthesizers and modules and pedals that are out there in the world, and I would love to try them all. It's definitely a deep rabbit hole, I suppose. And I will always have a great appreciation for all of these other instruments, but there is something to be said about developing a very specific relationship with an instrument over the course of many, many years. And since I've been playing trumpet from when I was very young, I have such a strong connection to this instrument, and I feel like I understand it and it understands me in a way that I haven't gotten to with any other instrument yet. All right, so we have made it to the end of another patron Q&A. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions for this video, and thank you to all of you for tuning in and sharing a cup of tea with me. Again, if you would like to submit a question for the next Q&A, you can do that by hopping over to my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/SarahBelleReid, signing up at any tier and looking for the post that says submit your questions here. Okay, that's it. Take care and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.